this computer. So we're recording. We got volume. And then I think everyone's in.
Yeah.
Or let's see.
Should be good to go.
So I wonder how I can get rid of the waiting room. Oh, there you go. Nice. Now you can just log in. Okay. We'll give it a couple more minutes, let people trickle in.
Yeah. And then certainly if you guys have questions, you can certainly enter on the chat. We'll be checking that periodically throughout the this next hour or so. And we'll give some introductions here shortly.
Yeah.
But if everybody could just mute themselves as well, just to reduce the amount of background noise, that'd be helpful for us as well. I'll wait another minute or so before we kind of get started here.
Oh, that's better or the other one better?
Full screen.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see here.
So we're just working through one little technical difficulty here. We will get started here momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
We just
here.
I think.
Yeah, I think that's. I don't know.
Okay. This is one more thing here.
Sorry, guys, figuring out Zoom for the first time.
In terms of hosting the meeting, let's see.
Yeah, if anyone knows how to get the thing just on us, or I don't know if anyone can see everyone else's screens. I don't know.
If somebody could just, are you seeing just our screen or everyone's face? If somebody could just verbalize what you're seeing.
I just see you guys, but
You just see us.
Yeah, you might be on gallery view. If you
Yeah.
gallery view. Either that or I think you could just pin yourself.
Okay, let's pin us in video.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Oh,
Okay.
Thank you.
Here we go.
Okay.
All right, 6:33. Let's rock it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us for this impromptu talk. We've heard a lot of just opinions and the uncertainty and the questions that a lot of people who are aspiring to go into PM&R or who are in this field have expressed. And so Josh and I felt like, this would be an opportune time to kind of hold a informal chat just to flood any questions and kind of hear any concerns and try as best as we can to help. So we'll start with some brief introductions and then kind of get into what we're hoping for the night. So my name is Chris. This is Josh. I'll let Josh introduce himself a little bit more.
Yeah. So I'm Josh Romero, everybody. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Went to medical school at the University of New Mexico. Grew up basically playing sports from the age of 5 up through college, and so that was kind of a big significant thing for my background. I actually didn't even know about PM&R starting medical school. My school didn't have a program at the time. We recently added one as of last year, but our school didn't have a department or anything like that, so I didn't know anything about it. So went into medical school, really interested in like orthopedic surgery, was considering emergency medicine, both kind of avenues to sports medicine. And then, heard about PM&R early in 3rd year, and that kind of developed over the course of the year. And so I actually at the start of 4th year was still interested in kind of between PM&R, emergency medicine, and ortho. And so it wasn't through my experiences through like away rotations that I kind of learned more about PM&R at that time. Personal interest in PM&R, I really like musculoskeletal ultrasound. I like, comprehensive spine care is kind of something I'm interested in. Sports medicine in general, something that I'm interested in. So don't know exactly where we're going to end up, but that's kind of the general gist. And I think that it's worth us mentioning what our interests are, because that certainly biased what programs we found more interesting than others, and kind of like what through the lens in which we look through PM&R. I think that's everyone's going to have their reasons for why they like PM&R. So I think that understanding that each of us has biases, understanding what our personal interests are is going to be helpful for you to kind of understand where we're approaching this from.
Perfect. Awesome. And yep, my name is Chris. I'm a intern just like Josh here at Mayo, born and raised in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. Did my training at University of North Texas, Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine. Got into PM&R early into medical school. I was really grateful for a good mentor of mine at TCOM, Dr. Omar Salat, who kind of turned me on to it. Before then, I was thinking either pediatrics or neurology. I also had never heard about PM&R. And my background, my interest, really, my dad has polio. He contracted that back in Vietnam at a young age. So grew up with a father with a disability and a spinal cord injury, and really just grew up very attuned to function and how the created world helps or detracts from people being able to navigate that. And then coupled with my interest in sports, playing soccer growing up, PM&R was the great fit for me. And getting into medical school just did a lot more opportunities and experiences in the field and realized that that was the perfect fit. So yeah, here we are. So kind of, you know, the layout for the night, really, it's going to be very informal. I think our takeaway from this whole thing, why we're doing this in the first place, is that we were in your shoes not too long ago. And we realized that amidst COVID and all these new changes, there's a lot of questions and a lot of fear and a lot of doubt about what's to come. We will not have all the answers by any means. Tonight will be, you know, us giving our best shot and just giving our own perspective, being interns, almost wrapping up intern year, having gone through the process, sharing whatever wisdom or, you know, knowledge that we may have accrued over the last 2-3 years doing this. And we want you all to really kind of drive the conversation. We've received tons of questions, and so we'll go through those, but please feel free to chime in and put your own questions in the chat. We are trying to organize it a little bit, but it's very free-spirited. We've gotten some questions about, you know, medical student experiences. How can we enhance or prepare our residency applications while we're in MS3 or MS2 even? And then moving beyond that into what the MS4s are really thinking about. We have questions regarding away rotations. We have questions regarding interview season and what virtual interviews will be like. We also have questions on intern year and lastly, kind of the residency process and what residency has been like for us. And so we'll try and stick to that timeline, but obviously this conversation will unfold. Our hope is that we will stop this at 7:30. So forgive us if we're a little punctual or a little short with certain responses. We want to be able to flood as many as we can. And just a plug, at 7:30, PM&R Scholars is actually hosting an event talking about the transition from PGY1 to PGY2. So it's also kind of an opportune time once you guys leave our chat to transition over there. So anything else to add before we get into it?
No, I think that, you know, like Chris said, our hope with this is that we know that there's a lot of questions in the air right now, and our goal is just to provide some hope, some beam of hope during all of this. And we're both very interested in mentorship and medical education as a whole. And so our goal is that you walk away from this at least uplifted in some fashion, knowing that we're not going to have all of the answers to probably many questions. And certainly we're only a year removed from your shoes, but certainly we have some reflections just from this year that we're hoping will be helpful for you. So that's kind of our intention. Well, we'll just kind of get started.
Yeah.
So the first topic people kind of talk about was, you know, so for medical students who are interested in PM&R, how do we learn more about the field? Particularly for somebody that maybe doesn't have a program or doesn't have a residency program out there or a department. And we'll just kind of briefly talk about each one of these. And if there's certain questions, certainly we'll try to answer all of them, but we're going to be a little limited with time. So I think, one of the things we had talked about was, you know, the AAPM&R and AAP certainly have phenomenal resources about the field. Luckily, one of the silver linings of COVID, if there are any, are that there's been a huge expansion of online virtual resources. There certainly was some present before that, but there's been a boom in that with both of these entities now. You know, beyond that, if there's any interest groups at your school, certainly that's a great resource. You know, kind of the basic things, if there's faculty at your school, those are certainly great resources. And certainly things like this. So obviously Twitter is a great networking opportunity, which I wasn't really part of prior to this year, and I'm still kind of developing within that space. But that's certainly a great opportunity. And for you being already on here, that's a good opportunity to kind of reach out and meet new people from that standpoint. And Chris can kind of talk more about that as well.
Yeah, I would say I think it's definitely going to be harder to get those experiences, whether you're an MS1, MS2 starting out, or you're on the tail end. And so, yeah, the big concern is, how do I get more exposure? I think we have to leverage the digital tools that we have today. And so definitely, if you're not on Twitter, if you heard about this through a friend who was on Twitter, I think, follow their shoes and get on. It's just a great online community where we can spread ideas and, talk about things like this on a bigger platform. And then beyond that, things that I did early on was just try and reach out to mentors and find someone to help guide you. I think it's a lot easier to try not to reinvent the wheel and try and figure out what's worked for people who have gone before you. And so if that requires just emailing, sending them messages, calling their office even, any kind of exposure you have early on, just get in as early as you can. The earlier and the sooner you get into physiatry related experiences and clinical experiences, the sooner you'll figure out if this specialty is a good fit for you. And that's really the best way to discern that, is to just get your feet wet and get in there.
I think that one of the positive things is, because PM&R is such a broad field, there are many opportunities or experiences that can have a PM&R spin to it. So it is, I think that I wouldn't necessarily focus on what is something that is very directly related to PM&R, because there are so many things that are related to this field. And so I think that any experience that you find meaningful or adds value to your medical education or your development as a physician or just a person will certainly be helpful long term. So I wouldn't necessarily just focus just on PM&R related type thing, because one of the great parts of it is it's so broad that many things can be applicable long term.
Mm-hmm. So we'll just move to the next question. Someone says, I'm interested in some fields like spinal cord, pediatrics that my school doesn't have access to, or that I might not be able to fit into my schedule. Do you have any resources or tips on how to get more exposure and make connections virtually? I think we kind of touched on this, right?
Yeah.
But anything comes to your mind?
We had kind of talked about the social media presence.
Yeah.
Certainly there's some good resources that are popping up. So there's the Pocketpedia, the Pnr Pocketpedia, which is a good resource. Certainly covers things at a superficial level, but certainly is a good resource to start with. There's PM&R Secrets, which is another good resource. Actually, Dr. D'Angelo from Indiana created a resource called PM&R Recap, which is kind of just getting off the ground here. I mean, the videos have been up, but the question bank's now live. So that's really another resource that can be helpful.
Yeah, that's kind of like a Pathoma. If you use that Pathoma for PM&R, it's a great resource, and we've just started getting into it. So
that's certainly another thing, but that's going to give you more of the subject matter of the field, and I think that's certainly a good thing. I wouldn't focus on trying to study that very in depth right now, but that's certainly a good, see if that subject matter interests you at all.
Yeah.
The last thing I talk about too is a lot of conferences are going virtual now. Certainly we would all love to be doing the in-person conferences, but that may not be a possibility for several months, maybe even longer. And so I think trying to be diligent about seeking conferences that could be helpful for you and that your interest would be a good thing moving forward as well.
Yeah. So I think the main takeaway for your new medical students, early medical students, and even MS3, MS4s is there's just, obviously you guys have seen the litany of online resources now. I try and delve in those as much as you can. And then beyond those, because obviously we all have Zoom burnout, we all have webinar burnout, I think try and make as many connections on the ground, mentorship with residents, with medical students. If you don't have an interest group at your school, try and start one, and just foster some kind of connection to help bring those resources to you. So with that, I think we'll pause. And if anyone has any other questions about, medical student related things, early or mid or late in your schooling process, please let us know. Feel free to get on the video or type it in the chat. And if not, then we can move on to kind of away rotations and that next topic. Does anyone off the bat have any questions? And sorry, again, we're going through this so fast, but we want to be mindful of everyone's questions. I don't see anything in the chat yet. How did you choose PM&R over sports medicine fellowship? Just came in. So I think, I guess it's a little confusing of a question for us because
over sports.
So
I guess just to clarify, sports medicine is one potential fellowship from PM&R. certainly you can enter it from other fields such as family medicine, emergency medicine, orthopedic surgery, internal medicine, pediatrics. Those all have pathways to sports medicine. Maybe the question was why specifically going the PM&R route to sports medicine. So I don't think either of us are definitively going to go into sports medicine. We're still trying to figure that out for ourselves right now. So, but you know, what pearls I would say is that, at least from a non-surgical standpoint, PM&R certainly will give you the most in-depth MSK knowledge from that standpoint. And so I think that that's definitely, we're both interested in MSK, so I think that's certainly a large pulling factor. The biomechanics you learn, the pathology, and I think that, you know, at least from our program, we get a lot of MSK ultrasounds. So I think that's really going to be a plus from a sports medicine standpoint. Those are some reasons why PM&R over like family medicine or emergency medicine. Certainly each field has something to contribute to sports medicine, because again, sports medicine is a very broad field. But I guess that's why, from the PM&R standpoint specifically, if that was the question.
And so just to clarify, sports medicine is a fellowship that you can go to in PM&R, but there's like a whole host of different fellowships that you can do that are usually 1 to 2 years. And PM&R is kind of the base specialty, but as Josh mentioned, there's other base specialties that can allow you to get into sports as well. Perfect. Thanks, Brett.
Great.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, great.
Okay. I think the next one is about what do you think would make a competitive applicant in the upcoming cycle, considering that there are no ways or academic physiatry letters that people will be able to get?
You know, that's a phenomenal question. And, you know, coming from two people, we both did aways during our application cycle. We both rotated here at Mayo as fourth years. And so we certainly feel for those people who would like to do away rotations. And you think that that's, to be honest, it's going to be certainly a challenge. But one thing from a sense of hope is that everybody's on the same playing field from not necessarily having the opportunity to do away rotations. And so one thing we had talked about, and again, this is us just talking about what would be helpful if we're in your shoes right now, would be, you know, still the basic premise of an away rotation is twofold. Really, it's for you to interview the program for whatever duration you're there, but also for them to kind of evaluate you, which most of you probably know that by now. But I think it's important to think about it as a two-way street. It's not just them interviewing you, you're also interviewing the program. And I think that's one thing about that theme will come up in this presentation, but that's one thing we want you to think about. So the way to, I would think about it on a spectrum. One spectrum is you do 0 away rotations, 1 is in person. The intermediate here is kind of this reaching out to the program to saying, can we do anything virtually? Can you be involved in the virtual didactics? Can you talk to faculty prior to interviews? Anything you can do to kind of bridge that gap. I imagine each program still kind of figuring out where they fall in terms of what they're going to allow or have time for, but certainly reaching out and showing interest in every aspect, as you probably have in medical school, is going to be helpful here. And so I think that that's what we would do. That's not something we kind of talked about if we were in your shoes at this point.
Yeah, I would also add, you know, like Josh mentioned, that no one essentially will have that opportunity to do aways unless, you know, you don't have that opportunity at your home institution. Then the AMC is making an exception. But beyond that, a lot of the same factors that we applied with and the factors that consisted or comprised of our application still stand for you guys. So I'd say, you know, the nuts and bolts are your personal statement. It has to be on point. I would definitely recommend drafting and redrafting and get as many people to lay eyes on that personal statement as you can, because now think about how much more program directors and people who are reading your application will rely on that, because that's really your story. So find a way to craft a narrative that tells your story into why PM&R. Well, and then beyond that, the next level is not just why PM&R, but what kind of applicant will they get if they choose you? And I think that that's something that's hard for us as students to think about, is kind of selling yourself and viewing it as a job application. Try and promote yourself to the next level, saying, if you choose Dr. Josh Romero, this is the kind of applicant, this is the kind of resident you can expect to have. And then beyond that, the letters of recommendation still stand as very, very important. PM&R is still a very small specialty, so people know each other inevitably. And if you can't get a letter from an academic physiatry place, you know, there's still mentors you've inevitably come across during your 3rd and 4th year, if not earlier, that know who you are, can vouch for you, and can speak to your interests and your quality of application. And so, you know, I can't harp enough. Personal statement, letters of rec, making sure that your ERAS, which just opened up, by the way, is kind of teed up to the nines, and make sure that that thing is just perfect.
And I think that, one of the things we had talked about too was, while it's probably a lot more work, certainly if there's programs, maybe your top X number of programs that you're very interested in, I would consider writing a personalized personal statement for that specific program. Yeah. And certainly that could be challenging to help differentiate why program X, Y, or Z prior to, kind of interview season. But I think that I'm sure some of you probably have programs you're more interested in others. And so I think that might be one extra way to help differentiate yourself a little bit amongst this application cycle. Certainly don't think that's required by any means, but that's just one little thing that might be helpful. So that's, the general gist is 80 to 90% of the application this year will be the same as it has every year. Certainly with the lack of in-person interviews and the inability to do away rotations from our understanding right now, is that'll add a little bit of a variation. But the reassuring thing is what has always been true is still going to be true. Just making sure looking for like any typos in your application, getting personalized letters of recommendation that speak to your strengths are certainly going to always be helpful. And these are all basics I'm sure most of you already know, but it's probably reassuring just to hear that that's the case here, that there's not going to be some extra fancy thing here that someone doesn't know about. It's going to be, everyone's kind of in the same boat. And so you want to find little ways in which you kind of differentiate yourself. And so maybe personalized personal statements, one little subtle thing that makes a difference here.
Mm-hmm. And then, if you guys are concerned about, how do we know about these places or what the nuances are before we get there, I am seeing, like Kentucky is doing these get to know us virtual webinars, and that's something we're considering here at Mayo too. So let us know if that would be helpful for you. Obviously, we can't speak to all the nuances of Mayo and the experience because we're just about to get into it. And so let us know if it'd be helpful if we had our chiefs on board and maybe residents from different classes. We're very open to the idea of having a get to know us webinar for some more discussion. Looks like we have another question here from Samantha. If we cannot get a letter from a PD of a PM&R program, should we try to get a letter from a PD that we rotated with in third or fourth year? For example, Samantha rotated with a family medicine program director and worked directly with him. Or would this harm me since it's from family medicine? Okay, so I guess the question is, if you can't get a PD PM&R letter, what about a PD from a different specialty?
I think that's certainly there's no one right answer. If you were to line 10 of us up, you might have 10 different answers to some extent. I don't know that I would necessarily stake it on whether it's a PD or not necessarily. I think that certainly just having it from somebody who knows you well, number one, is always going to be important. So if that is the family medicine PD in this case, and that's certainly helpful, I would certainly try to get some PM&R faculty to vouch on your behalf. Doesn't necessarily need to be a PD. None of mine were PD letters of recommendation, but I think that certainly somebody that can speak to your unique characteristics as a person. What I would say is getting a letter from a PD versus that's kind of generic versus getting a letter that's very personalized because somebody knows you well. I think the latter is going to certainly be the more helpful in this case. But I don't think it necessarily needs to be a PD necessarily. Yeah, I would certainly say if you can get a letter from a physiatrist, that's obviously going to be helpful. Granted, I think that I'd hope that there'd be a little bit of grace and understanding with the things that are going on. So for me, I only had 2 letters. I submitted 4, and I think the minimum is 3. So I submitted 4, and 2 were from physiatrists. One was Dr. Salat, and then another one was a spinal cord attending I worked with. And then my other 2 were actually completely different specialties. I had, coming from a DO school, we're primary care heavy. So I had our Dean of Family Medicine write one. And then I also had someone in palliative care, which was really kind of out of left field, but I felt like that physician really knew me well, and he was able to speak on my strengths and kind of say, I think Chris will be a great physiatrist. Even though I'm a palliative care physician, they know you, and they know your characteristics and your personality. So, I had 4 letters as well. 3 of mine were PM&R, and 1 was IM actually. certainly the benefits of getting letters from somebody outside of the specialty are it demonstrates that you can work well in fields that aren't necessarily unique to what you're going to go into. And that just is good skills to be a physician in general. And so I think that that's certainly, there's a lot of merit in that. So certainly you want to have at least, I would say at least 2 from PM&R, but I don't think that including outside specialties that would be wrong. If they know you really well, that's certainly gonna be very helpful for you.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Samantha. We got one from Justin, and thanks George and Michael for telling us about the webinar. We will pitch that and we will get back to you for when that will happen. Justin says, if we wanted to get involved in a program's virtual didactics, who do we reach out to? Program coordinator? I think that's a good idea. Sure. I think at this point, all bets are off. I mean, I would not be hesitant to reach out to the program coordinator, residents if you know them. I'm sure everyone in PM&R is so nice and welcoming and open. And so I would say, yeah, anyone you know in that program that can get you involved, see what can happen, you know?
Yeah, and I think certainly if you can reach out to the program director and just say, you know, I mean, that could always be a little nerve-wracking as a student, but I think that's certainly a good step, saying, you know, I would love to have rotated here, whether depending on what they're offering or not for students, how can I be involved in some fashion? And so, and then from there, they might plug you into the program coordinator or somebody else that can kind of get you hooked in from the administrative perspective. But I think that, again, it's just the general concept here of showing interest, which is exactly what an away rotation is. And so I think that trying to bridge that gap here, reaching out via email and trying to get involved virtually is the best intermediate in this circumstance.
Yeah, yeah. Any other questions in the meantime? If not, we can go to kind of our list here. Did we have, someone asked, did we have virtual interviews during your application cycle? If so, what were they like? We talked about it. Unfortunately, neither of us did. We both had phone calls from intern year programs. And so I'd say, like, you know, that was similar in that we weren't there in person, but the phone calls were pretty straightforward. You know, in my reflection, I was actually surprised at how well I connected with the PD who called me from my intern year program. This was in Indianapolis. I think we talked for like 30, 45 minutes, and I was surprised how much I could even hear her voice, understand, you know, her emotions, and we had a great conversation. I felt like I really got to know her, and she really got to know me, and I got to know the program even just through hearing her voice. And so, you know, let that be some kind of encouragement, that even more so, if programs are going to be interviewing you with face technology and Zoom technology, that more often than not, you'll be able to read, you know, the vibes of that program or those residents or what have you. That technology is pretty robust. I mean, we're able to communicate with you guys right now, and you can see us, you know, talking and kind of hear what we're saying and understand where we're coming from. And so I think my one encouragement is that, you know, I wouldn't get caught up so much on, you know, how much will this negatively impact us or take away from us, but really try and see it as a way to be adaptable and flexible, and let your creativity and let your strengths shine through that. Find ways to use that medium to your advantage rather than just thinking about how disadvantageous. I think we should all lament that you can't be there in person, but I think that certainly there's still opportunities to show them who you are.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, I would not have too much to add from that standpoint, but certainly I also felt that from the phone call reviews for an intern year wasn't really substantially, it wasn't inhibited from that fashion necessarily. You know, I think that, you know, at least I think that certainly Zoom is more involved than a phone call. So I think that's going to add even more elements to that, which is going to be, I think, a little more beneficial. But again, it's trying to be creative with how do you interact with the virtual interview. Just like you prepare for an in-person interview, you're going to prepare for a Zoom interview. It's just changing the lens here a little bit. But that certainly doesn't mean that this is going to be a bad thing from that standpoint. I mean, one thing as physicians, we always have to be adaptable, and this is a little philosophical thing in the background, saying how can you be adaptable amongst these changing circumstances. And so I would look at it as how can you embrace these challenges and how can you move forward with them, knowing that they're not ideal, but everybody's kind of in that same boat right now. So let that be a little source of encouragement, hopefully, right now.
Does anyone have any other questions about interviews? I know we're zooming through things fast, or anything about away rotations. I will say, so from a Mayo perspective, and we can talk about Mayo specifics later, but as far as like how COVID has impacted the practice in general of the residency application, no definitive like long-term changes as of now. I think we all know that away rotations for the most part have been discouraged unless the applicant does not have an experience at that medical school that they're at. And if they don't, even then, the recommendation is that they were still to remain regional. And so that is, that's a huge disappointment to hear, because we both came from outside the region, Josh from the Southwest and I'm from the South. But again, looking back into residency classes in the past, that's not a main barrier. There's people who didn't do aways here. There's people who are from here, aren't from here. It's kind of just up in the air. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's really based on who you are and what your application is like, and your fit. And so don't let that, fact that you can't do an away rotation or just those limitations kind of eat at you too much. We are doing virtual interviews for sure. And trying to see, and we are, from a Mayo perspective, we are going to be doing like meet and greets through Zoom the evening before interview days. We were told that. And then lastly, we're going to be working on some like video series from a PM&R perspective, as well as a Mayo Clinic institution perspective. We have a new facility here as far as the inpatient rehab goes, and so we'd like to showcase that. And even though you guys can't come here, we'd like to be able to show what that looks like, as well as from a Mayo perspective, what the campus looks like, what the culture is like. And so those will be made available hopefully in the future before season kicks off. And then lastly, I know that there's always room to improve on social media. So we're going to be bolstering our social media presence, so you guys have a little bit more on the ground look at what residency is like and what training here is like. So those are just little tidbits to add from a Mayo perspective. Okay, let's see.
So it looks like somebody's kind of asking here.
Yes.
How do you navigate applying to both categorical and advanced programs? I don't think, again, there's not a right or wrong answer here. Certainly there's merits to doing advanced or categorical. We both did categorical here at Mayo, so we can kind of speak from that perspective. But there's certainly the pros of staying at one institution during the entirety of your residency. But there's also a lot of merit in training somewhere else for your intern year and bringing that perspective to a new institution. I think that comes down more to a personal decision overall. I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer. There's certainly more advanced programs within the spectrum of the programs that are available. But what I would say is that, like for myself, at the time when I was applying, I applied to a lot more categorical because I felt that was a better fit for me personally. And I applied to all of the categorical actually. But I certainly applied to a fair number of advanced as well. But that was just a personal decision, not necessarily wanting to move twice. But I was certainly open to if I needed to, but that was kind of the reason how I approached it. But again, I think that's going to come down to a personal decision. What are your family dynamics in terms of moving, not moving? What region of the country are you willing to stay in or not? And so that's going to ultimately come down to what fits you best. And certainly what I would say is, ultimately think of it that way. What fits your life best? Everybody has different personal, social dynamics. And so whatever is going to work for you or your family or your spouse is going to be the best option here. So I think that's how I think about that.
Yeah, certainly, there's a convenience factor if you do categorical. And I was kind of in the same boat as Josh. We have a family, I have a wife and a baby. And so we wanted to avoid a second move. But that being said, I wouldn't just focus on, the intern year, or, I want to do my intern year at the same place. I think everyone's intern year, for the most part, if you look at the ACGME requirements, we're all going to get the same experiences. And so I would not be hesitant to, do an intern year elsewhere and then take those skills and bring it to my PM&R program. And so the nice thing is, you can interview at both, or some programs that have, you can rank both tracks. And at the end of the day, you can rank, once you've kind of discerned, okay, which one feels better, which one fits better, you can rank accordingly, categorical or advanced, on what you prefer. But yeah, just be open and kind of see if you don't know off the bat, and see how the season unfolds. But I think I interviewed it like a healthy 50-50 mix between the two. Okay, got some more questions. Pollock, in your opinion, how important is it to go to a program that offers the fellowship you're interested in?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Good question.
Certainly, so, some of the obvious benefits of that are that you have access to faculty that are available for mentorship, research, or just even that clinical experience. I don't think that's necessarily a prohibitive factor for getting the fellowship you want. Certainly, just like it is in medical school, with each phase, trying to do as well as you can in each phase is going to be the most helpful thing here. Certainly, the benefits of going to a place that has a fellowship are likely more access to seeing if that's actually what you want to do. Because I think that one of the challenges of medical training is we have these preconceptions of what we want to do, and we do a lot of research about things, but not everything pans out in the day-to-day as it looks on paper. And so I think that the benefit is you get to see if that's something you actually do, knowing though that how things look, like what sports medicine looks like here versus in Seattle versus in Boston versus in Southwest. I mean, any different thing might vary. And so I think that just kind of keeping in mind that practices vary, obviously, but it certainly can be helpful. But I wouldn't necessarily look at that if they don't have the fellowship you want, that, oh, I shouldn't go there. Because there's certainly going to be every place that has its strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I would say that was one thing that I looked at as far as Mayo, is not a specific fellowship because I'm pretty much undiscerned, but just are there those resources and those mentors there in different specialties should I become interested in spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury. And so I would stress, instead of just looking at fellowship opportunities, just the well-roundedness of the program. Are they having faculty mentors from different areas of the country, from different training sites, from different backgrounds as far as clinical expertise? And I think that will ultimately, if you're someone like me who is undifferentiated, kind of help you discern better. And that's something I'm excited to delve into is, we have a wealth of faculty from all different backgrounds, and we have most of the fellowships as well. But I would not say that it's a make or break at all. Yeah. Okay, next question. Shrina, how much research were you both involved in prior to applying to residency? How much does research impact your decision on accepting applicants?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was involved in a decent amount in medical school. So I had several projects by the time I was done that I had completed at the end of medical school. I also did a quality improvement, like research practicum during my third year, which was fairly helpful. Just for kind of learning quality improvement and just understanding some more like IRB, that whole process. Don't necessarily think that you have to have in-depth experience with that. There's certainly people who are at this program who had little to no exposure to research prior to getting accepted here at Mayo. So I don't know that you necessarily have to. I mean, I would look at it, if it's something you're personally interested in, then I think that's certainly a worthy experience. But I don't think that you need to just do things just to pad your CV. I mean, we all do that to some extent at some point. But I would look at it. It's all quality over quantity here. So get experiences that are helpful for you, and then from that standpoint, those are things you can talk about versus having several low-hanging fruit papers that you don't really know too superficially. I think, again, always quality over quantity is going to be helpful here.
Yeah, can't stress that enough. I think once you get to our stage and you quote unquote made it, you realize that, man, I might have done a lot of things that really there weren't passion projects, or they're just hoops to jump through. And so I think it's very important to try and stay true to yourself. And if you don't like research, that's fine. And why do a lot of research if that's not something you're going to do for the rest of your career? Residency is only 4 years. You have 40 years after that. And so I would say, I did a fair amount of research, like research summer programs and stuff, but I always try to, instead of just doing the research, try and see it as an opportunity to connect with people in those research endeavors. And my research was really more of like my way to just connect with people and kind of pick mentors' brains and kind of build a network. And so the best things that came out of my research that I did during medical school was the friends I made, and the connections I made, and just the different discussions we had. you don't need publications. You don't need like all these things. So I hope that's helpful.
And I think the way to think about it too is the other two benefits of that are it can show commitment. So it's better to stay with the project from beginning to end rather than try to accumulate, multiple projects. It's better to like finish it from beginning to end. That shows commitment through a process, which is really helpful to demonstrate. And then also too, research is helpful to look more into personal interests. And so that's what I would think about it. If it's something you're not interested in, it's a lot of work typically, a lot of not very fun work if it's not something you're interested in. So that's another way to explore personal interests. But again, we can get into this mode of thinking that we need to do all these things that in order to get into these different places. And so again, if it's not meaningful for you, I don't think that it's something that I would invest my time. That's just some reflections we've had being on this side of things. And certainly we all did things during medical school that we may not have been most passionate about, but that's just one piece of advice that we can hope to pass on.
Okay. No questions yet. So we've talked about medical student experience. We've talked about interviews. We've talked about away rotations. I think we can transition more to, intern year or the match process. If you guys have any questions about that or residency or Mayo specific, I think we still have 20 minutes. And so, yeah, I'm encouraged. We're doing good here on time. Okay, Neil, how many places do you guys recommend applying to? It'll really depend. We got a lot of questions. Okay, here we go. Buckle up. It'll really depend on your application. If your school has a counselor like mine did, she was super helpful in kind of running the numbers, statistics, and kind of that perfect number. When I was applying, the key number was like 10 to 12 interviews. That was kind of the goal target. And based on your statistics and kind of all that stuff, your likelihood of getting that number would drive how many programs you apply to. So I applied to, if I can remember correctly, for PM&R, I applied to 35 programs. I would probably, in hindsight, have applied to less. I probably applied to too many, to be honest. And it's hard when you're a medical student because you want to maximize your chances. And I can't imagine you guys being in your shoes right now. But I will say one of my biggest reflections was I would probably believe in myself a little bit more and don't buy into the hype as much, and trust the process and realize that at the end of the day, you can only go to one program. And so you can't interview at 100 programs or 60 programs. It's a very expensive thing to do. So I don't have a magic number for you. I definitely recommend you reach out to your school counselor. And if not, reach out to the residents who've gone before you at your school. Find those with similar backgrounds, experiences, test scores, that kind of stuff, and see what kind of target you want to aim for. I would still say 10 to 12 interviews is probably a fair number.
That's right.
Yeah, I know I have friends who apply to literally every program. Some apply to 10. So I'm not that confident or bold, but I think 35 is probably still a little too much for me personally.
I believe I applied to 30. I don't know off the top of my head exact numbers. I certainly still think that was probably too many. There's going to be variation in how many programs you should apply to. I think as Chris said, I think the big thing on this side of things is you just realize that ultimately you can only go to one program. So whether you get 20 interviews, 5 interviews, 15, or anything in between, you only end up going to one. And one of the programs you interview at will be a good place for you. And so I think that just realizing that, well, of course it is a numbers game, the ultimate, at the end of the day, it's going to just be one program. And so I think that staying true to yourself about what you're wanting out of this program is going to be the most helpful thing here again. That's kind of, I guess, I'd approach. There's no, in any of these questions, in any of these scenarios, there's no perfect or right answer.
Right.
Certainly, everybody that gives you advice is going to have biases, just like we both do. But our goal would just be that we try to offer advice that's been helpful for us, and that we also have reflections being on this side of the spectrum, just like I'm sure you do being medical students as you would talk to pre-med. So we don't have any secret sauce here or anything that's any magic here. It's just more that we have reflections being on this side of the coin here. So.
Okay, Justin's got another question here. For fourth years, do you think we should be prepared to address the pandemic and implicit bias during our interviews? That's a great question.
Wow, that's good, yeah.
My gut tells me yes. I think just given all the recent current events, I think, it's an opportune time to have some self-reflections on that, if you haven't already. And to really, be able to articulate your thoughts about it and how it's impacted you. And you don't have to have any grand, like, philosophical things or
Answer to
be able to, like, solve everything. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if it came up during interview questions. I wouldn't be surprised if people just wanted to hear your thoughts, and probably not from like a malignant standpoint, or like, I'm trying to put you on the spot. I think it's a very historic time. I think we've all had our own struggles during this time, from all perspectives.
I think that one thing Chris and I had talked about, if we were program directors right now, how do we incorporate the changes, the sudden changes that have happened, and how would we gauge applicants from that standpoint? And so, I think a big thing here is, how do you embrace adversity, and how do you become adaptable? Certainly, just as much as you all are trying to navigate this changing landscape of applications, programs are doing the same thing. There's no textbook on how to approach this right now. Everyone's trying to figure it out, and so that requires a large degree of flexibility and ability to adapt and embrace adversity. And so there certainly would be, I think it'd be very fair to say, how have you improved during this pandemic, or how has this changed your thoughts as a physician? And so again, there's no right answer here, but I think that that's one big thing, because certainly it's impacted our society as a whole. And so I think that, and it has changed obviously how hospitals operate, and likely will change how we move forward to some extent. And so I think that would be the bigger philosophical question here, versus the, details about, vaccination or things like of that nature. I think it's going to be the bigger approach of how do you move forward from this standpoint.
Yeah. Ultimately, we're in public health, so it's a public health matter. Cynthia asked, "Why did you choose Mayo?" Oof. Do you have 5 hours? We talked about this prior to. Man, it's really hard to describe. We both ranked Mayo number one. We can be honest about that. We interviewed at places all around the country, especially West, East Coast, Midwest. I think for me, why did I choose Mayo? To keep it short, I think the culture here is just very unique, unremarkable. You have to really come and experience it, or just, I would recommend watching the documentary, actually. There's Ken Burns put out a documentary on the Mayo Clinic and its origin and its inception and what they're doing now, on Netflix. And I think for me, I knew that when I set foot here on campus and started meeting the individuals that I worked with in the PM&R department, that these are the people that I wanted to be around. I wanted to strive like they strove. I wanted to continue to espouse the values that they have. Mayo Clinic has very specific values that align with my personal belief system. And ultimately, it was just a place that I knew I would thrive from a career specific standpoint, on my own interests within PM&R, but also, having a family. I knew that my family here would thrive here in Rochester, and that ultimately it was a place that just fit well with me. And I know it's such a generic answer, but it really did not have anything where I was like, I don't really vibe with that. And so it became a clear number one choice at the end. Yeah.
I think, certainly most people that walk away say this is a very special place. And so that in and of itself is a fairly vague comment. What does that mean? Hard to, that's going to mean something different for every person. I think the thing is, we're all products of our environment. And so there's no difference between that and the place you train. And certainly that doesn't mean that you can't still be an individual amongst a large institution, but certainly we're products of our environment. So, here there's just such a culture of collaboration. Education is highly valued here. Research is certainly widely available. Not, there is some requirements that just like for every program, but there's opportunity, but it's not necessarily forced upon you. But the biggest thing is just to focus on collaboration. And we both felt that this was a place that we would develop into a very competent physician. We're going to certainly gain a lot of the skills that we're hoping to gain from a residency program, but more so, we're all doctors globally. That's where we all went to medical school, to be doctors. And so we felt this was a place that we could develop to be compassionate doctors. And so we felt that combination of being clinically competent, but then also incredibly compassionate, was a blend we wanted to be as physicians. And so this place just it absolutely will help us develop that way. And so Certainly there's a lot of personal development that you have to do separate from a program, but we thought that this was a program that can help us bring out those characteristics within ourselves. And there's the details that we can get into about the detail specific program, like, you know, MSK ultrasound and things like that, if you all want us to, but that's kind of the global picture of why we thought this is a good place for us.
Yeah, it comes down to fit. It really always comes down to fit. All right, Justin, do you foresee there being a cap on apps? That one, I honestly will probably defer. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Good question,
I don't think
though.
anyone knows yet, but would I be surprised? No, because now we can all apply to however many. But I'm sorry, we'll have to defer.
Yeah.
We don't know about that one. How did you choose what programs to apply to, Timothy? Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, it was mostly places that I've heard good things about and I had good experiences with in the past. And so, you know, I narrowed it down to 35, and that was hard to do because every program has its own unique characteristics and they all make good impressions. For me, it was more of my specialty interests. You know, I'm interested in comprehensive spine care and MSK and Regen Med. And so really thinking about what place would set me up for success in my career in the future. And just looking at the different institutions and what they had to offer. Beyond that, you know, taking in personal factors as well. Cost of living, is it safe to raise a family? Would my wife thrive there? Would there be job opportunities for her? Would our growing family be able to thrive there? I personally just don't like traffic, so it was like high traffic, just out. No traffic in Rochester. I can assure you that. I can assure you that. You can get anywhere within like 5 minutes. So, you know, we all have our specific kind of characteristics, but for me, it was career, specialty interests, family, resident culture was a big one. You know, what are the residents like? How do they get along? Would I see myself as part of that family? Other resources that that institution may have. And so I actually ended up making like a whole spreadsheet of like 20 different factors and kind of ranked them and spit out this formula. And at the end of the day, I honestly just discarded the whole thing. It was all about that fit. So I don't know, how did you choose?
No, yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing. I think another way you can approach it is regionally. You know, there's an area of the country that either you have your family's from, your spouse is from, if you're in that situation, or even just a place that you see yourself enjoying. So, you know, just being from the Southwest, I like the outdoors. So I kind of chose programs that I thought would sort of fit with the outdoors lifestyle. You know, I didn't only apply to those programs, but that was a large decision point for me as well. I think looking back now, there's you know, we all try to come up with these ways on how to rank programs and try to assign values to different things, and most of those are fairly arbitrary. I mean, you do your best to do that, but they're kind of arbitrary. And so I think at the end of the day, they're just programs that after you walk away, you just know if it feels right or not. And I would just trust that gut feeling. Certainly you will get that gut feeling after you've interviewed there, so it's hard to necessarily get that prior to that. But you know, I think that looking into, are you gonna have any social support anywhere? So if you're going somewhere by yourself, so you know, I moved here by myself, is that are you gonna be able to develop a community there? Is that a place that you feel you can thrive both professionally and personally? Because one thing we'll say is, you know, Chris and I looked at, we've become great friends this year, and that's been phenomenal. But you know, there's gonna be other places in which developing a social network might be a little bit of a challenge up front, and that's okay. That's a growing process. But to say that that's not important in your day to day, it would be lying. That certainly is important. So, you know, I think that that's something to keep in mind. So that's obviously something that we don't always talk about. That's certainly important beyond just the program itself. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback off of that. Oh, I don't know. Oh, it just popped up something. Can you guys still hear us? I don't know. Did it log out?
We can still hear you. You're still here.
Okay. All right.
Like everything's working.
Okay. The thing just bumped. Okay.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Yeah, we don't know what happened. Anyways, so I just piggyback off of that and say, one of my biggest reflections from intern year was how much the things that I worried about the residency program, the intern year program, all those nuances, those were honestly not as important as I mean, to an extent, but honestly, the fit of the city and the culture of the place that you're going to be training is at. 4 years is a very, very long time. If you think about it, you're a very different person when you started MS1 to now as an MS4, and all the more so when you're in residency training. And so you want to make sure that you have a good support system. You want to make sure that you're going to be in an environment that'll help you foster your gifts and your talents, and will ultimately allow you to thrive. And that cannot be overstated.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Rocco, are there any resources in a program you didn't think about before but find invaluable now? Resources in a program.
Sorry, just to clarify, are you saying like learning more about the program, or
Like things that the program provides?
Yeah. Maybe just a little more clarification on that question.
Say so. I don't know. Nothing really comes off the bat for me.
Yeah.
As far as
I think certainly the things that probably most people already do, looking into the program's website. Certainly different programs have more robust websites than others. If any program has an online social media presence, that certainly might be helpful. I imagine most of you have probably, looked through Reddit or these different experiences. One thing I will keep saying in mind though is that some of what was documented, everything you read is someone's personal recollection of that, right? So there's going to be personal bias inherently to that. So that's certainly a good framework as to reflections from each program, but things can change within a year. I mean, certainly there's been changes amongst even in the last year here. So there can be changes within a year. And so I think that you should take that with a grain of salt. Also, I would say that try to go into each program with a clean slate to some extent, and have your own personal interpretation of the interview day or that program, because everybody comes at things with a different lens. And so I think that if you let other people spin a bias your own, you may not have an interpretation that's unique to yourself. So that's kind of way how I approach that.
Yeah. We have about 3 more minutes, kind of wrapping things up here. And please continue to submit your questions. Whatever we don't get to, we will table and readdress. And if there's enough interest, we could even do another session. But we'll definitely circle back with those who we aren't able to answer. So Justin says, are there any program red flags that you learned on the interview trail you wish you knew about? I would say like institutionally specific, not like, oh, this one has a red flag or that one. I would say I would definitely, try and discern that from just talking with the residents or getting to know people who have interviewed that program prior on their impressions. But like Josh said, take everything with a grain of salt. Programs are always changing. Leadership's always changing. The residents change every year. And so, I think be very, very open-minded, I would say, and just walk in without many expectations and see. Obviously, there's probably those close-handed issues where you're like, if this program doesn't meet these requirements, I can probably just, say I'll pass. And so try and figure out what those close-handed issues are rather than the open-handed ones that you're willing to negotiate on. And so we all have our own personal, oh, that's a red flag for me. But I can't specifically speak into, your situation, Justin, or any kind of programs. Thank you for the question. And then probably 1 or 2 more. Samantha, can you explain rank lists and any strategies for them? Oof. There's a good video on NRMP. They have a good, this is the rank list algorithm, and it's like all cartoons, and it's very easily digestible for someone like me who needs pictures and like squigglies. Rank list is essentially this process where you interviewed all these places, and there's 2 meeting of the minds where you decide which ones are your favorites, they decide which applicants were their favorite, and then sometime in February they punch it in the computer. It's this algorithm. Apparently it takes very, very quick to run, and the rank list or the ranked list and the match process kind of does its thing and computes, and it spits out the perfect match for all 40,000 or however many students across the country. Strategies, choose your favorite, put it at the top, and then I don't think that playing, there's no like system that you can really play. Certainly some people will say rank every program. Some will say, if it's cost prohibitive, just rank, some. That'll be specific to your personal situation, but rank the one that you want the best, I would say.
Yeah, certainly, just to piggyback, I truly the way to approach that is rank in order that you want, not in order to which you think you'll match at or not.
Yeah.
Rank the order you want, because more than likely you'll be surprised how things shake out. And so I think that if there's a place that you really want to go to number one, put that as number one. Even if it's the top place in the country and you don't know if you'll get in there, put that number one. Because if you don't put it number one, you certainly will not get there.
Yeah.
So shoot for the stars here. You know, we both feel very fortunate to be where we're at, and so we would just encourage you to sort of certainly rank in the order that you prefer, and that's kind of the general gist here. There's going to be always, as you kind of get into the nuances of like 3, 4, 5, 6, all these different, like that's kind of hard to say, but certainly if like the top few would truly rank based on where you'd like to end up.
And I think Sandra posted the link. Thank you, Sandra. Really appreciate that. Okay, guys, we're at 7:30. I promised 7:30, 1 hour. That felt really, really quick. It was like lightning rounds, but I hope it was helpful at the very least, and somewhat useful. So yeah, I guess we'll conclude here. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Certainly Josh and I are here. If you have any questions, you know how to reach us through Twitter. We're both on Twitter. And then we'll follow up on any questions we miss. We'll also follow up on Mayo doing our own kind of residency get to know you. In the meantime, please don't be a stranger. We're here to help.
Absolutely.
We're both on lighter months too.
Yeah,
so
we're happy to be mentors if we can in some fashion, and we're certainly really open to that. We both had a lot of mentors help us kind of get to where we're at. So the big thing is it'll all be okay.
It'll be okay.
We know there's challenges. It'll all be okay. Just taking one thing at a time and enjoy the process.
Yeah.
It certainly can be stressful, but it's a heck of a time as well. So enjoy the process, and in a year from now, you'll be starting
here.
Yeah, you'll be here. So just enjoy the process, and don't enjoy this year. This is a good year.
Yeah.
For the fourth year, this is a good year. And then students that are earlier in the career, there's merit to each year. So just kind of enjoy the entire process.
Right. And don't study and take vacation.
All right.
See you guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.